There are so many buses here. Today, we are here for the Autumn Bus Rally.
Welcome to the 2024 Autumn Bus Rally. My name's Colin and I'm one of the volunteers here, and I've been involved with the Autumn Bus Rally for 30 years now. I've done every single one. We've moved to a new site this year at Alton College. It's a smaller site than we used to have. There's still just as much organisation needs to go on before and indeed after the event every year, just to make sure that we improve, and also of course to make sure that everybody comes out and has a lovely day out riding on the buses and a safe day out. The site itself is quite separated one part from the other. You've got the bus station at one end of the site, you've got the huge student car park at the other end of the site where all the static buses are. And at the moment we're standing in the bus station, and as you can see, the buses are being very well used, especially the open toppers, town services, and we run trips out to Odium, we go to Lasham, Bentworth and lots of the surrounding villages.
Hello, my name is Tom Lingwood from the Southampton District Transport Heritage Trust. Today at the Autumn Bus Rally we have at least two vehicles on display, both Guy Arabs and both of Southampton City origins. This is here, it's 222 GTR 484. It was sold to a preservationist in the 70s and 80s, which actually David Ryder, who was a BBC disc jockey at the time. And then it was kept next to the Bluebell Railway. And unfortunately it suffered a fire there, and then it ended up in a shed for many years, and then it was found by actually one of our members, and then someone else purchased it and started doing some work on it. Then one of our late members, who's just recently passed away, Richard Perry, purchased it with a few other people, and it went over to Kent and was fully restored to how it is today. You know, it was at Netley event last week, and it was spent a lot of money getting it up to how it is today. And next to it we have LOW 217, number 71. This is the first time it's been out to a bus event for many years. It's just come back from having a lot of money spent on the mechanical side. There's still a few jobs to be done on it. We have luckily found someone who would look after do the mechanical side for us. As it says on the sign over there, still owned by Southampton City Council, but we look after it. And inside is very original compared to 222, which is brand new.
This is my second bus. It's also a Leyland. It's a Leyland PD212, which is 8 foot wide, vacuum braked. It's 1953, which makes it a bit older than the Brighton one. It's only 26 feet long and it only has 56 seats on it. So it's a little bit more lively as a vehicle than the Brighton one because it's not as heavy. Worked at Plymouth Corporation from new. They turned it into a driver trainer at the end of its working life with them, and eventually they sold it. It went to another driving school and was used privately to teach new bus drivers for a while until the late 80s when it was stored. It was stored for quite a long time, and then it passed through various people's hands until it reached me in 2010, 2011 when I bought it, and it's taken me 8 or 9 years to totally sort it all out and get it up and running again. It's a vinyl one version, In the old days, they would have been what they call a varnish fix transfer. So you would had to paint the back of the transfer with a thing called gold size, which is a very refined varnish, which acts as a glue.
Right.
And then when it's gone tacky, you've already, the paper will have lines on, vertical and horizontal. So you mark the lines on the panel, so that you only get one go at it. So once you're happy that it's going to stick, you line your lines up on the backing paper and you put it on. And you then use a flat spatula to make sure there are no air bubbles and what have you. And then when you're happy it's not going to come off again, you use water to then soak off the paper that's on this side. And then you can peel it off and you end up with that. There's 56 seats altogether. There's 20 downstairs and 36 upstairs. It's only 26 feet long, which was the longest length allowed in 1953. The other one, my Brighton one, is 27'6" because the construction and use regulations were changed and allowed them to on 2 axles to make
How
them
tall
longer.
is this one?
The same height, 14'6". That was roughly a standard height for a high bridge double decker of the period. You do find some slightly higher, and you might find some fractionally lower, but they differ within a few inches. That's all. The Southdown Queen Mary, if you know what that is, the full-fronted Leyland PD3 that Southdown bought, they're all 14'7". They're just an inch higher than these. We've basically removed all the outer panelling so we could have a look at the structure underneath. It's a steel structure with hardwood inserts. Most of the hardwood inserts, some are okay and some of them are rotted.
How high is this platform, do you think?
How high? Well, it's a good 18 inches, 18 to 20 inches, but that's normal. If you go and look at most, if you go and look at that one, see this is roughly the same height. That's how they were.
Let's have a look inside.
You may, yes. The moquette we've used was exactly the same as what was used originally, so this is how it would have been, or how it would have looked when it was new. The only difference is the floor now is covered with a modern non-slip material, light grey colour, whereas originally it would have had brown lino. Brown lino is a nightmare to work with. You know, I just paid this and the contractor put it down, and it's ideal. It suits the colour scheme, makes it look nice and smart. These things in the floor are lifting eyes. If you're doing maintenance on it, you can unscrew this cover and you've got a threaded hole through there. You can bolt on the other side a lifting eye. You can screw it in so that if you need to change a gearbox or a clutch on the engine, same with the ones you're standing on, those two are for removing cylinder heads off the engine block, and this one is for lifting gearbox. It's the other side of that we saw in the floor upstairs. Now, where my finger's going up there, that's a threaded hole. You can thread a lifting eye into that. Well, you can buy lifting eyes that have got a thread on and screw it in. So you then got your chains and your lifting thing, you know, like a gear. So, and you've got these panels up. You can then take the weight of the gearbox, which is right underneath where we're standing now. The flywheel on the back of the engine follows that curve in there. That comes off as well. But you can actually, if you want to change the gearbox, you can take the weight of it with a lifting tackle.
I've never seen that before.
No, it's peculiar to Leylands. My Brighton one hasn't got it. You have to struggle. But it was a good idea.
I mean Leyland body rather than...
Yeah, the bodywork on this is by Leyland. The chassis is Leyland, the bodywork's Leyland. The whole thing is produced by Leyland.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that's been there, but that was on there when I acquired the vehicle. My guess is that it's probably been on there from maybe the 1970s. A £5 reward would have been a fair amount of money in 1970.
Oh, I love this button.
Because it's rear exit, Plymouth decided they needed something else so the conductor could hear as well. Because he's at this end, driver's got a bell in the cab, but at this end it's a buzzer. That's the buzzer. It's just a repeat of the bell. The bell you can hear in the cab. All the light fittings are all original. At the moment that's another job to be done because they're not wired in yet into the control box in the cab. But they are original light fittings.
As the coaches were coming in.
Good afternoon. Here we are in Alton in July 2024. And this year we are celebrating 90 years since Associated Motorways was formed in July 1934. Associated Motorways was a consortium of express coach service operators. They got together to enable passengers to travel from virtually anywhere in England, Wales, and some parts of Scotland to pretty much anywhere else. And they used the newly built Cheltenham coach station that Black and White Motorways had opened in 1930 in Cheltenham Spa town. Associated Motorways is not a name most of us know of these days, or indeed rings off the tongue. But back in the 1930s, 40s, 1950s and 1960s, if you wanted to travel by express service coach across much of Britain, then Associated Motorways was the company you turned to. As I said earlier, Associated Motorways was formed in 1934, and there were 5 coach operators that got together to form the association: Black and White Motorways of Cheltenham, Bristol Greyhound of Bristol, Red and White of Chepstow, Midland Red of Birmingham, and United Counties of Northampton. And the concept was very easy, really. All their coaches, from wherever they started in Britain, all got together in Cheltenham at around the same time and allowed passengers to have a comfort stop, a cup of tea and something to eat before they boarded the next coach to finish their journey. All the coaches would depart Cheltenham coach station en masse around the same time at several mass departure times each day. The busiest departure was usually the 2 o'clock departure in the afternoon. This operation continued for nearly 50 years, from 1934 until January 1984, when the last mass departure left Cheltenham and 2 generations of express coach service passengers left their journeys behind them. But earlier this month, a whole group of coach preservationists like myself got together and we assembled in Cheltenham and we recreated the golden days of Cheltenham coach station and Associated Motorways, including a mass departure from our base for the day at 4 p.m. And we shall be doing the same thing again on the 13th of July 2025. Associated Motorways really didn't have a logo, but if you could think of it, this was probably the one most passengers were aware of. And the reason they didn't really have a logo is because each of the operators, like Red and White, had their own livery and their own coach style and design. But if you were a passenger in whatever town or village you lived in, you could buy an Associated Motorways ticket from your town or village to nearly any other town or village across Britain. So they offered the passenger the advantage of a through booking from anywhere to anywhere, long before the days of the internet. So popular was the service, this was a regular display in the windscreens of coaches saying Associated Motorways Express Service Duplicate. Indeed, in the summer, they would have nearly 800 coaches on the roads of Britain, transporting passengers on their holidays and to visit relatives and friends. As I said, this July we recreated the sights and sounds of Associated Motorways Express Service, and we produced a little brochure detailing the history of the organisation, and there are some copies of this still available if you're interested from the Thames Valley and Great Western Omnibus website. So thank you for sharing the history of Associated Motorways.
So here we are in Alton. It's nearly 4 o'clock and quite soon we'll be going home, taking 494, the bus behind me, with us. We've been here today at the Alton Rally, reborn for 2024 here in the Alton College site. It's taken a bit of getting used to, but it's been a great day and the weather has more or less cooperated. It hasn't actually rained. And now the sun is beating down on us and we're getting really rather hot. But anyway, in the few minutes before we depart, time to remind ourselves that the bus that I'm standing in front of, that you are looking at, is looks perfectly normal. Doesn't look like any old 1950s double-decker. But of course, this is POU 494, and this is a Leyland Titan PD2 24, a very rare specimen. It has a pneumocyclic automatic transmission, of course, which it looks like any other 1950s half-cab double-decker, low bridge to get under the bridges and not to beat the trees too much. But of course 494 is rather special. First of all, it's a King Alfred bus. Secondly, it's been travelling the world, because having worked in Winchester from 1956 until about the end of 1972, it was sold, or rather bought, by a gentleman who worked for a company called Omnibus Promotions, and they went around England and Wales buying old low bridge double-deckers and painting them red and writing London Transport on the side and selling them to gullible Americans. And that's what happened to this vehicle. It was bought from our Chisnall & Sons Limited, King Alfred Motor Services, by Omnibus Promotions for £50. It was an MOT failure, so it came with no ticket, as they say. It was taken up to Sibel Headingham in Essex, where it was cleaned up, sorted out, painted red, London Transport written along the side, Trafalgar Square in the front destination, and exported to the United States, where it was bought by what's called a realtor which is a state agent in our speak, in Augusta, Georgia. And it worked in Augusta, the owners believing that they had a London bus. Fast forward to 1987, thereabouts, and I'm working in Fareham for what was then the People's Provincial Buses, and the phone rings in my office, and it's an American voice on the other end of the phone that says, "What does the number POU 494 mean to you?" And I said, "Well, it's a long-lost King Alfred bus." And he said, "It's not lost, it's outside my window." And a year or two went by, and then he came with his daughter and his wife to England, and they visited Winchester, and we lined all the King Alfred buses up in the Broadway for him to look at. And he said, "Okay," he said, "you can have our bus, but you have to bring another bus to my museum. I want you to find another British double-decker bus. I want you to paint it green with a King Alfred statue on the side, and I want you to deliver it to my museum. When you do that, I will give you the bus." So we said, "Okay, that's a deal then." And we found an old Leicester bus, as a matter of fact. The Leicester people have never quite forgiven me, but anyway, we sorted it out and painted it green, and eventually booked a passage for it from Southampton to Jacksonville, Florida. And we drove the bus from there, and we arrived in Augusta. They said, "Right, you can have it. You can have POU." Unfortunately, it was in a terrible state by this time, and we had just a week to sort it out and drive it back to Jacksonville. It had no sort of, well, it hadn't run for years, in a terrible state. But anyway, we were able to get it moving, and we drove it down to Jacksonville, got it on the boat that we'd booked for it, came over to Southampton, and eventually found its way to our yard at Chalmers Ford in 1993. We rebuilt it there in the open, and in 1997 or thereabouts, it was finished. And what you see behind me now is what we prepared then. So, and it looks more or less like it would have done when it was running in Winchester in the 1950s and 1960s. So you see, a bus that looks perfectly all right and normal has a bit of a story to tell, and we like telling it.
Coming down your way,